The air in Arthur Jenkins's office was thick with a grief that wasn't entirely mine. It was more a collective, performative sorrow, draped over the expensive mahogany table and the surprisingly uncomfortable leather chairs. We were all there, a morbid family reunion, gathered to hear the last wishes of my mother, Eleanor, just 3 weeks after her funeral. My father, Richard, sat directly across from me, his face a mask of solemnity that I knew, intimately, was a lie. Beside him sat my sister, Sarah, her eyes red, her hand clasped in his. My Aunt Carol, Mom's sister, sat by the window, a genuine sadness etched into her features, a stark contrast to the rest of the room. I felt a hollow ache in my chest, a constant reminder of Mom's absence. She was the anchor, the one who always smoothed over the jagged edges of our family, especially those between Dad and me. Now, without her, I felt adrift and exposed, bracing myself not just for the finality of the will, but for the inevitable drama Dad would undoubtedly stir. He had a knack for it, a talent for turning any solemn occasion into a stage for his own self-interest. Mr. Jenkins cleared his throat, adjusting his spectacles. As you all know, we are here today to read the last will and testament of Eleanor Vance. He began with the usual legal preamble, a drone of clauses and definitions that blurred into background noise. My mind drifted, remembering Mom's laughter, her gentle touch, the way she'd always tried to mediate my father's constant disapproval of my life choices. I'd chosen art, a path Dad deemed frivolous while he pushed Sarah into business, a path she'd reluctantly followed. Then, Mr. Jenkins's voice sharpened, pulling me back. Eleanor's primary estate, including her personal investments and the family home at 14 Oakwood Lane, is to be divided as follows. He detailed several smaller bequests to charities Mom supported, then came to the core of it. To her daughter, Sarah Vance, Eleanor leaves a trust fund valued at $200,000, and all personal effects not otherwise specified. Sarah sniffled, a soft sound of gratitude. And to her son, Michael Vance, Mr. A. Jenkins continued, his eyes meeting mine. Eleanor leaves the full ownership of the family home at 14 Oakwood Lane, free and clear, along with a separate trust fund of $300,000. A quiet gasp rippled through the room. I felt my breath catch. The house. Mom's house. My childhood home. I'd always loved that house, but I'd never expected it. Sarah's inheritance was substantial, but the house, that was something else entirely. It was Mom's studio, her garden, the place where she truly lived. Before I could even process the sheer weight of that inheritance, a booming voice shattered the fragile peace. What? Dad practically launched himself from his chair. The house? To Michael? That's preposterous. Eleanor would never. That house is mine. It's been our marital home for 35 years. His face was crimson, his eyes blazing with a fury that was all too familiar. He pointed a trembling finger at me. He can't have it. He'll just let it rot or turn it into some bohemian commune. I demand that property. It should be mine. The room fell silent, save for Dad's heavy breathing. Sarah looked mortified, shrinking in her seat. Aunt Carol's jaw dropped. Mr. Jenkins, a man accustomed to conflict, stared at Dad with an expression of utter disbelief. My own shock quickly morphed into a cold, hard anger. In front of the whole family, barely 3 weeks after Mom's death, Dad was trying to seize what she had so clearly, so intentionally, left to me. The betrayal was a punch to the gut. The betrayal was a punch to the gut. I felt a cold wave wash over me, replacing the initial shock with a burning indignation. How dare he? How dare he challenge Mom's last wishes in front of everyone, barely 3 weeks after we'd buried her? My eyes narrowed, locking onto his furious gaze. Dad, I said, my voice low and steady, a stark contrast to his booming outrage. This isn't about what you demand. This is about what Mom wanted. This is her will. I gestured vaguely at the document in Mr. Jenkins' hand. She made her wishes very clear. Clear? He scoffed, his face contorting further. She was clearly manipulated, or perhaps confused. She knew that house was ours. It was always understood that it would pass to me. He slammed his fist on the armrest of his chair, making a dull thud that echoed in the stunned silence. You think you can just waltz in and claim it? You who barely visited in the last 5 years? You who never gave a damn about the garden or the leaky faucet in the guest bathroom? My jaw tightened. I loved that house, Dad. And I loved Mom. More than you seem to realize. She knew exactly what she was doing. She knew what that house meant to her. My gaze swept around the room, meeting Sarah's wide, apologetic eyes, then Aunt Carol's look of bewildered sympathy. It wasn't just a house to her, Dad. It was her sanctuary, her studio, the place where she created everything she cherished. And frankly, I continued, turning back to him, my voice gaining strength, she knew you didn't appreciate that side of it. Or of her. His eyes blazed hotter. Don't you dare imply I didn't appreciate your mother. I provided for her. I paid for that house. It's our marital asset. And as her husband, I have a claim. A stronger claim than some artist who paints on old canvases and lets things fall into disrepair. He pointed at me again, his finger trembling. You'll ruin it. You'll turn it into some bohemian flophouse. I won't allow it. Mr. Jenkins finally cleared his throat, his expression now one of firm professionalism. Mr. Vance, with all due respect, Eleanor's will is legally sound. She was of sound mind when she executed it. The house at 14 Oakwood Lane was solely in her name, as per the post-nuptial agreement signed by both of you 15 years ago. She had every right to bequeath it as she saw fit. Aunt Carol let out a small, choked gasp. I had almost forgotten about the post-nuptial agreement. It had been a quiet, painful period for Mom, a time when she'd asserted her financial independence after one of Dad's particularly reckless business ventures. Dad, however, looked like he'd been slapped. The color drained from his face, replaced by a pasty white. He had clearly forgotten, or perhaps conveniently ignored, that detail. A post-nup? He stammered, his voice losing some of its thunder. That's preposterous. That was just a formality. A silly thing Eleanor insisted on. It was no formality, Mr. Vance, Mr. Jenkins stated plainly. It legally separated specific assets, including the house, into Eleanor's sole possession. Her wishes, as expressed in this will, are final and legally binding. The air in the room thickened, heavy with Dad's sputtering rage and the silent, uncomfortable tension of everyone else. I watched him, a mix of pity and cold resolve hardening my heart. He wasn't just grieving Mom. He was grieving the loss of control, the loss of what he believed was his due. But this wasn't about him. It was about Mom, and her final, deliberate act. I wouldn't let him erase it. I wouldn't let him win. This house, her house, was mine now, and I was prepared to fight for it. The air in the room thickened, heavy with Dad's sputtering rage and the silent, uncomfortable tension of everyone else. I watched him, a mix of pity and cold resolve hardening my heart. He wasn't just grieving Mom. He was grieving the loss of control, the loss of what he believed was his due. But this wasn't about him. It was about Mom, and her final, deliberate act. I wouldn't let him erase it. I wouldn't let him win. This house, her house, was mine now, and I was prepared to fight for it. Dad's face, still pale, contorted into an ugly grimace. Final and legally binding? He spat, his voice rising again, raw with disbelief and fury. He turned his gaze from Mr. Jenkins to me, his eyes burning. You knew about this, didn't you? This elaborate scheme. You put her up to it, filling her head with nonsense, turning her against me. Aunt Carol gasped again, a sharper, more indignant sound this time. Mr. Jenkins, however, remained impassive, a testament to his years of handling contentious wills. I felt a surge of heat, a familiar anger bubbling up, but I forced myself to remain calm. This was his tactic, to deflect, to accuse, to make himself the victim. I wouldn't fall for it. Dad, I said, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands. Mom made her own decisions, always, and she made them for reasons you refused to acknowledge. The truth hung in the air, a phantom of every argument, every disappointment, every quiet act of resilience Mom had shown throughout their marriage. He had always dismissed her, underestimated her. This will was her final, undeniable statement. He scoffed, a bitter, humorless sound. Decisions? She was vulnerable. You preyed on her vulnerability. She knew I needed this house. It's our legacy, the children's legacy. He gestured wildly around the living room, as if the very walls would somehow validate his claim. What will you do with it, huh? Fill it with your dusty canvases and your half-finished sculptures? Let it rot away like your career? The sting of his words was sharp, but I met his gaze without flinching. I'll do what Mom wanted, I stated, my voice firm. I'll make it a home, a place of creation, a space where her memory can live on, not just a property asset to be leveraged or sold off. The unspoken accusation hung between us. Unlike you, Mr. Jenkins cleared his throat once more, his voice cutting through the escalating tension. Mr. Vance, I understand this is a difficult time. but your accusations are unfounded and, frankly, inappropriate. Eleanor's will is clear. As executor, it is my duty to ensure her wishes are carried out without interference." He looked pointedly at Dad. "Any attempts to contest this will would be futile and, I must warn you, would incur significant legal costs without any realistic chance of success." Dad's jaw worked, his face a mask of thwarted rage. He looked from Mr. Jenkins to me, then to Aunt Carol, as if seeking an ally he wouldn't find. His eyes finally settled on me, colder now, devoid of the earlier performative grief, replaced by a calculating venom. "You think this is over?" he murmured, low and dangerous. "You think you can just waltz in here and take what's mine? We'll see about that. This isn't just about a piece of paper, is it? This is about family. And I'm still your father." He pushed himself up from the armchair, his movements stiff and deliberate, his eyes never leaving mine. "You'll regret this. I promise you. You'll regret challenging me." With that chilling promise, he stormed out of the living room, his heavy footsteps echoing down the hall before the front door slammed shut, rattling the very foundations of the house. A profound silence fell, broken only by Aunt Carol's soft whimper. I stood there, trembling slightly, but my resolve had solidified into something unyielding. This wasn't just a legal battle, it was personal, and it had just begun. The front door's echo faded into the heavy silence, leaving Aunt Carol and me in its wake. She sat slumped on the armchair, a handkerchief pressed to her mouth, her eyes wide and tear-filled. Mr. Jenkins, ever the professional, broke the spell. "Mr. Vance?" he said, adjusting his spectacles. "I strongly advise you to change the locks on all exterior doors immediately, and perhaps consider a security system. Your father, he can be unpredictable." I nodded, the advice hitting me with a cold clarity. This wasn't just a squabble. It was a territorial dispute with real-world implications. My father wouldn't just threaten, he would act. Aunt Carol finally lowered her handkerchief. "He's always been like this," she whispered, her voice raspy. "When he wants something, he'll stop at nothing." Eleanor knew it. That's why she wrote the will the way she did. Her words, though confirming my fears, also strengthened my resolve. Mom had known. She had trusted me. Once Mr. Jenkins had departed, leaving me with a stack of paperwork and a stern warning about legal counsel, I found myself alone with Aunt Carol. We sat for a long time, the weight of the house and its new burden pressing down on us. Eventually, she offered to help me unpack some boxes, a quiet gesture of solidarity that I desperately needed. That evening, as I lay in Mom's old bed, the silence of the house felt less like peace and more like a held breath, waiting for the storm. The next few days were a blur of practicalities and a desperate attempt to reclaim the space. I changed the locks myself, a symbolic act that felt both empowering and terrifying. I started clearing out Mom's studio, carefully cataloging her sketches, her half-finished sculptures, the vibrant canvases leaning against the walls. Each item was a story, a touchstone to her spirit, and I felt her presence guiding me, fueling my determination. This house wouldn't rot, it would bloom. Then came the first volley. A registered letter arrived, bearing the insignia of my father's new legal team. It wasn't a direct challenge to the will. Mr. Jenkins had assured me that would be futile, but it was a demand for personal items that my father claimed were his. It was a thinly veiled attempt to gain entry, to assert his presence, to sow discord. The list was vague, encompassing everything from a specific antique clock in the living room, a family heirloom Mom had always cherished, to a set of valuable first-edition books. He even included a ridiculous claim to Mom's old gardening tools he'd never once touched in his life. The audacity of it made my stomach churn. It wasn't about the items themselves. It was about control, about reminding me that he was still there, still fighting. I called Mr. Jenkins, my voice tight with a frustration I tried to keep in check. He advised me to simply acknowledge receipt and state that I would review the list, buying time. He reiterated that my father would likely try every tactic imaginable, legal and otherwise, to make my life difficult. The tension in the house became palpable. Every shadow seemed to hold a lurking threat. Every creak of the floorboards sent a jolt of anxiety through me. I found myself checking the new locks multiple times a day, jumping at the sound of the doorbell. My father hadn't just slammed the door on his way out. He had opened a new, terrifying chapter in our lives. The quiet solitude I had hoped for, the space for healing and creation, was now a battleground. And I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that this was only the beginning. The anxiety intensified with each passing day. Every car that slowed on the street, every unknown number flashing on my phone, sent my heart racing. I barely slept, haunted by images of my father's sneering face, his sense of entitlement, his relentless desire to strip away everything my mother had built. The house, once my sanctuary, felt like a cage, every shadow a potential threat, every creak a warning. Then came the call, not from Mr. Jenkins, but a blocked number. When I answered, a voice, unmistakably my father's, cut through the silence. He didn't introduce himself, just launched into a tirade about his rightful property, threatening legal action that would bankrupt me and expose my mother's secrets. He even hinted at challenging her mental competency at the time of the will. It was a vile, desperate attempt to intimidate, to break me. My hand shook as I hung up, but something shifted within me. The fear was still there, a cold knot in my stomach, but beneath it, a spark of pure, unadulterated fury ignited. This wasn't just about the house or the objects. It was about my mother's dignity, her legacy. He had tainted her memory enough. I wouldn't let him do it again. I called Mr. Jenkins, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands. I recounted the call, every word. He listened patiently, then advised, "This is harassment. We will send a cease and desist order, and if he continues, we will seek a restraining order. He has crossed a line. You do not have to endure this." His words were a lifeline. I felt a surge of power, a strength I hadn't known I possessed. I wasn't just defending a house, I was defending a memory, a love, a future. I spent the next days not cowering, but working. I immersed myself in Mom's studio, sorting through her final, unfinished pieces. There was a half-painted canvas, a vibrant explosion of color depicting a garden in full bloom. It was her vision for this place, a testament to life and resilience. The antique clock, the first edition books, the very items my father coveted. I didn't hide them. Instead, I moved the clock to a more prominent place in the living room, winding it daily, its steady tick-tock a comforting rhythm. I arranged the books on a shelf in her studio, their worn pages a testament to countless hours of shared reading. They weren't just objects. They were stories, memories, anchors to a love he could never understand or possess. The cease and desist order was sent. For a week, the silence was deafening, then blessed. No more letters, no more calls, no more looming threats. My father had retreated, perhaps realizing he couldn't break me, couldn't steal the essence of what my mother had left behind. He had exhausted his tactics, and I had held firm. The tension in the house slowly began to dissipate, replaced by a quiet, profound peace. The shadows no longer held threats. They merely marked the passage of time. The creaks of the floorboards were just the gentle settling of an old, beloved home. I started planting new flowers in the garden, just as Mom had planned, creating the vibrant bloom she had envisioned. Each petal unfurling, each leaf reaching for the sun was a victory, a symbol of healing. I looked around the studio at the finished canvas now hanging proudly, a tribute to her vision. Her spirit wasn't just guiding me, it was in me. This house was no longer a battleground. It was a sanctuary, a canvas for my own life, a garden where grief could transform into growth. My father had tried to destroy, but all he had done was strengthen my roots, making me realize that some legacies are not just inherited, but fiercely, lovingly, earned. This was my home, my mother's legacy, and my future, finally ready to bloom.